With what can we compare the kingdom of God, or what parable shall we use for it? It is like a grain of mustard seed, which when sown upon the ground is the smallest of all the seeds on earth. Yet when it is sown, it grows up and becomes the greatest of all shrubs, and puts forth large branches, so that the birds of the air can make nests in its shade.
I guess it all started, when COVID hit back in March 2020. So I was sent home from school, and then there was no mass for a couple months at least, if I'm remembering correctly. And so there was just, Canon Ueda was, doing the live stream masses, which was great that he could do that, but it's really nothing in comparison to actually being at mass.
For 3 months or so, that's all we had. Of course, Sundays, I always had my family, of course, Sunday dress up, even though we're just watching the mass, right? Okay, we're going to be reverent in our living room. And then an approval came in June 2020 that masses could be said outdoors.
Yes, so we started at the house chapel at the clergy residence, and then when the county allowed the church to have the service in person, we found a parking lot. Every day we need to set up everything for mass. Just to do that, it requires almost an hour. Then when we left the parking lot, every day was empty. That's quite the experience. When I arrived, there was nothing. Then we have mass, and we set up everything, and then people came, and then when we left, there was nothing.
No, we just embraced it because the whole time we've been going to the Latin Mass, you just kind of embrace that you're going to be a nomad. So we're used to moving around and being here and there, but it is harder when you had to be outside. It can only get better, I think, from here, hopefully.
And then from there, we moved to a shopping center. We were indoors for a few months, and then again, we had to go back outdoors again, and same thing, we had to set up our canopies every single Mass.
Outdoor, cold, in the rain, but we had a covering, we had heaters.
Setting the tent and everything every day.
In the past, during the Black Plague, for example, or smallpox, or any of that, churches were open because that's what people needed. Is they needed the spiritual guidance and the solace of the church and the priests. And our priests were prevented from that, or at least hamstrung. But brave Canon Ueda, he found a way to do it.
He made what seemed to be a conscious effort to continue as much normal practice of the Catholic faith as possible. We ended up at one point having Mass outside, and he managed to find a way to have confessions available anyway. Everybody grew in their ability to cope with slightly unusual circumstances.
Each time I come back from break, I feel like there's a new location. We're, kind of our journey in the wilderness.
We're like a pilgrim church. We go from one place to another. Like Moses with the Israelites in the desert, but kind of like that,
After that, we found out that we couldn't stay there any longer. And it was a combination of 2 different places. Sunday Mass, we had our Masses in a chapel at a local Catholic school. And weekday Masses, we stayed at that same shopping center, but in a smaller unit. So we did that for another few months. And then Canon Ueda and the parishioners wanted to be in a more stable location, and that's where we are now.
In a rental space, in an office building, which is by no means ideal. But when you consider that the infant Jesus was born in a feeding trough for animals in the stable, right? We have no reason to complain, but we're very grateful for this space which is made available to us. And this space is small. It only seats maybe 100 people. And there are no pews. There are chairs and kneelers, and the ceiling is rather low. And so really we're looking for a place which really would be a sacred space, in a place that can accommodate the hundreds and hundreds of people who are seeking out this particular liturgy and the spirituality of the Institute in the church today.
The oratory model, we have seen that to be a working model in so many places, and it is true that Wausau, Wisconsin is really one of the flagships for that. It really is an excellent example of how the oratory model works. Here you already have an oratory in San Jose, but you're just looking for a permanent home, a permanent physical home. And I think when we look at what happened in Wausau, Wisconsin, we see what happens, what we can really do when we have a place that we can truly call home. When we have that, we see how it flourishes, we see how it grows, we see how people are nourished in their faith.
We are in various places around the world, but we are really on the outskirts. We're the Outpost in California. You can't get farther west. We're probably the little cousin compared to everybody else. But we want to be able to be self-reliant. We want to be able to provide for ourselves in some sense. And so what does that mean? It really means home. It really means having a church. And sometimes it's been painful not to have that. We've been in the desert. You know, we've been erecting the tent and taking it down and moving across, kind of like the Israelites.
And when they came into the promised land, of course, the natural desire is no longer to have the Ark of the Covenant under a tent of goatskins, but to have a beautiful temple. The Immaculate Heart of Mary Oratory is sort of like a sapling tree. It's beginning the life of what an ordinary Institute apostolate's like. But we can't say that despite all of the heroic effort and the beauty that there is even in this small little embryo, is good to leave it at that stage. The optimal view is that it becomes a beautiful tree, that it reaches a sort of maturity.
Property here is extremely expensive, and in fact, I wrote to friends and said, yes, you can buy a trailer, a mobile home, for $250,000. And a friend of mine said, that's one too many zeros. That's supposed to be $25,000, not $250,000. And I said, but that's on the low end. The expensive ones are more like $500,000. And he said, that doesn't make sense. Those numbers are completely out of whack. So at one level, it's a daunting prospect to be able to buy either an existing building or a plot of land on which we would then build.
Either we build a church, we remodel a church, we find a home that really will be lasting, not just for us, but for our children and grandchildren, So I think that's very important for us.
It's an amazing journey to come from a beautiful, amazingly big church, 5 wounds, and then to find ourselves in a parking lot and in a chapel and in all the different spots that we've landed, in a shopping center, and here we are. But you look back upon the ages and you see the journey of all the people who've suffered and still have their faith. It's a reflection upon all the past, and you realize that people have suffered through far worse and they've come through it all.
And there's so much beauty in that suffering, in that struggle, and our faith has deepened incredibly. For most of Nico's life, he's gone to Mass at a parking lot, shopping center, at different places, but he sees that we go.
I mean, ideally, if we could afford it, we would definitely want to stay here. It's a great community, and we would love for our children to be raised here and in the faith, and particularly with the Institute. So yeah, that would be the goal.
We see that the more we have to work and more we have to suffer for a particular effort, the more we see it's blessed by God. Ultimately, building a spiritual family and also building a community around a brick and mortar facility, this is really God's work and not ours. And so we do so in a spirit of faith and trust, and God purifies us. He puts us to the test.
I would like to make a personal appeal to those people who are watching this to contribute to the best that they can for this tiny outpost on the edge of the Institute's world in California. We need help to found our church, to build our church, to expand the community, and anything that you can do in terms of monetary help, prayer, talent, would be really very valuable for us.
I hope that even more people become aware of your pilgrimage, of this great trial, and the hope that you are exhibiting throughout all of this. And I do, of course, hope that leads to a generous response in terms of material support for your quest. But above all, I hope it leads more people to be impressed by your courage and, of course, to pray for the success of your great endeavor, which I certainly pray for as well.